This is the Beacon Podcast at Dojo Church. I'm Jonathan Schofield.
Clark McGlam.
Yep. And today we're going to be interviewing a good friend of ours, Anasthesia, who just came back from a missions trip in Kenya. And we can go right to that.
All right. Sounds good. Stay tuned. All right. So today we have Anasthesia. She just got back from a mission trip in Kenya, and she is going to tell us all about her experience and how Christ has moved in her life during that trip. And take away.
Well, is there anything you specifically want to know? Any questions you have before I just kind of
just
go and spiel?
Tell them how long you've been there and what you did, who you saw, just the basics.
Okay. Well, the whole trip altogether was really a God thing. I had gone in January to a meeting at New Hope Church in Durham, at the Durham campus, and was really interested and really felt God pull my heart towards a Kenyan missions trip. And they had a guest speaker. Her name was Maureen. She came, and she runs this organization called Mercy House that we got to be a part of when we went to Kenya. And she spoke about how God used her and changed her life, and how she wanted to give back to the people to her people. And out of that, she started this ministry called Mercy House. And in that moment, I really felt God was just placing on my heart that I needed to go to Kenya. So I went to this missions meeting, and I signed up and I joined my missions account and everything. And then I didn't hear anything about the trip for like 3 months. And I was like, I don't know what's going on. There's only like 3 months left, and I hadn't raised any of my money for it. And all of a sudden, within 3 weeks, like, all my stuff was done. All of my fundraising was done. All of my shots, and I had my passport. Like, everything had just come together so fast. And I was like, all right, God definitely wants me to go. I just don't understand why. And I'm still not sure that I fully understand why God called me to Kenya. I definitely have great stories and great things to share. It's just, I feel like there's something more, and I don't quite understand it yet, but I'm really excited about it. So it was a 1.5 week trip, and we left late on, I think it was Wednesday evening.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't get to Nairobi, Kenya until Friday night. And when we first got there, it was weird because we landed and we go through customs, and I'd never been out of the country except for Canada, and I drove through Canada, so it was a completely different experience. And we go through customs, and then we get in our bus that we had all week long, and we're driving to our first hotel, and everything looked kind of like New York City. Like, there was a Burger King and like random stuff like that, and I was like, I just didn't feel like I was in Kenya. I was like, what in the world? And so we get to our rooms, we go to sleep, we get up the next morning, and we meet all of the people that we were working with that week. So we worked with, I think it was 4 groups of people. One was Street Hope, which is done through our New Hope campus that we actually have located in Kenya. So we have a Kenya New Hope Church, and we also broke ground on another Kenya New Hope Church. So there's one in Thika, and then we're breaking ground on the one in Kiganjo, which is really cool. They're close to each other, but at the same time, there's hardly any cars there in the areas that they're in, and there's no roads. Everything's just dirt roads, so people walk everywhere. So driving in our bus, it took like 10-15 minutes to get to Kiganjo from Thika. Walking, it takes like an hour. And so we were like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. It reaches a lot more people. And so it was really cool to be a part of that. So we met the campus pastor for Thika, and then we met the family who runs Street Hope, and we met Maureen and her husband Oliver. They're the ones who do Mercy House. And we met Mama Carol. She is in charge of doing the ARC orphanage, which we also we don't sponsor it. So New Hope owns the Ark Orphanage. So we had bought the orphanage so that the children could just stay there, because that was an issue for a long time. And now we go and help them build things, and this time while we were there, we helped them build a farm, because their farm was in the actual orphanage area. So when you first walk in, there's a bunch of like rooms that they all stay in, and then there's this big open area, and within that open area they have like chickens and goats and a farm, and right next to it was the bathroom, and so it was like not healthy for the children.
Right.
And so we got to help build a farm that was kind of down the hill a little bit, so that was cool. So we did some stuff with the Ark Orphanage, and then I'm trying to think where the other place was. We went to Kiria, which is actually in the mountains of Kenya, and so we didn't get to meet with them that day, but later on in the week we got to do some work with them, and that was really awesome. So we met all of them, and then that day we went to the slums of Nairobi, and it was called Kiribu, I think that's how you say it, and it was sad, just so heartbreaking. And you'd see these little mud hut homes that were smaller than this room, and they had children, and they didn't have beds, they slept on the mud floor, and we get there and we get out, and right next to this slum there was a landfill, just heaping piles of trash surrounding this slum. And we had these 3 children walk with us, and they ended up just kind of sticking by me most of the way. And the one little girl held my hand, and we walked through it, and they're walking through all of this trash. Like, we walked through the landfill because families would go to the landfill and pick out like used food and used trash that people threw away that they thought they might be able to sell to have some money for their family, and they'd bring it back. And so these kids are walking through this landfill that has like medical waste and trash from airplanes. Like, they would just dump their trash there, and they're like barefoot walking through all this stuff, and I'm like, it's almost like so unreal. Like, I couldn't grasp it, like the understanding of how people could live that way, and especially little children. And these children walked a really far distance with us, and all I could think was like, where are their parents? Like, why is no one coming after them? And so they walked there with us, and they walked back, and we just got back on our bus and left. And I remember that night I was like, what am I doing? Like, I just watched something that was just completely heartbreaking, and I felt like I was just touring it. I stepped out, I looked around, I took a tour of what it looked like, and I got back on my bus and I left. And I didn't do anything. And I had a really hard time, like, getting past that night. When my friends from home called me, and I was on the phone with them, and I started crying. I was like, I feel like I'm not doing anything. I don't know why I'm here. Like, it's supposed to be a missions trip, and I feel like I just left these 3 children to starve and sort through trash. And they reminded me of the people that we were working with the rest of the week, and what they do, and how they give people hope, and that we got to be part of that, and that's what we're doing. And I was like, okay, yeah, maybe that's true. Like, let me experience that. And so, next day we got to work with Compassion. And for those of you who don't know what Compassion is an organization where you get to sponsor a child in another country, and in this instance it was in Kenya, and you'll sponsor them monthly, and it helps them have food to eat, and for them to get an education, and for them to have school uniforms, and they'll have Christmas presents and things that they don't ever get. So that's really cool. And so we went to a Compassion school there, and we met classrooms full of children. And the neat thing is when you see a child that's been sponsored, they're like, through Compassion, you can only sponsor one child per family. So, like, I got to visit one of their homes, and as we go in, this little girl was like 3 years old, super tiny, super cute. And her family had 7 children.
Wow.
And they were just as poor could be. And they were so thankful just for everything. And we got to visit and see how they lived and what it looked like to be a part of their life. And so they lived in a slum. And so we're walking through this slum, and we always had to have security guards with us. So we're walking through the slum, and we're going back through like these back alleys. And so like when you first walk through, you see like all these beat down shops, and that's really all you see. And then you get to go down all these narrow alleyways, and you see like where all these little homes are. And there's these little mud huts that have like these doorways that are normally like draped with some fabric because they don't have doors. And so we finally get to theirs, and we walk in, and there's a couch right here. There's a bed here and a bed here. They had 7 children and a mom and dad. Their oldest son slept on the couch. I think they said 2 kids slept with them in their bed, and then the rest of the kids slept on the other bed. And that's all they had. And we got to see how Compassion not only changes a child's life, but changes that family's life. Like it gave that family so much hope. Like just us visiting and praying with them and talking with them was like overwhelming to them, of just like how hopeful they were and just full of joy. And it was a huge change of seeing these children the day before, where it's like they had joy and they had fun, but when you looked into their eyes, it was just hopelessness that they had. That all they thought was this is what their life was always going to be. And then I got to be a part of this family who literally had nothing and was sponsored by Compassion, and now their children are getting an education. Well, their little daughter was getting an education. And Compassion doesn't just touch a child's life, but like it changes a family's life, which is crazy because they don't like specifically do anything for that family. It's very much towards the child that is sponsored. But in that, they get to see a group of people who love Christ and love Jesus and are just passionate about helping their child. And so they end up like following God and hearing the gospel because that's taught in their school. Like, this is who Jesus is. You know, we love Jesus. Jesus loves us. And they get to take that home with them every day. And then when their parents ask what they did at school, they get to talk about that and get to talk about how they're learning English. And it was super cool to see and be a part of, especially after seeing what we saw the day before and just kind of feeling really hopeless in such a rough situation. So we were there for a day, and then the next day was Sunday. And so Sunday we got to spend with our New Hope Thika campus, which was really cool because we got to meet everybody there that does what we do here. So I met the Access pastor, and I met one of their worship leaders, and I met all their worship leaders. And for those of you who don't know, I do worship at New Hope in Garner, so that was cool connection there, and I help with Access a little bit, and so I got to meet their Access pastor. And then my friend Ariel and she went with me to Kenya on this trip as well, and we became really good friends with the youth pastor and with some of the worship team, and we still talk to them now. Like, we've been gone or been home for, well, I guess it hasn't even been a week yet, almost a week, and we talk like every day, and just really encouraging people, just encouraging each other, like to do what God's called us to do. And we joke around and we become really good friends, and it was really cool to be a part of a worship service that's New Hope, that was completely different than what New Hope's like in America. like in Kenya, they don't have super fast Wi-Fi and internet all over the place, and so when we walk in for service, it's a 10 to 12:30 service, and the music aspect of the worship service was just so raw. There was no time limit on it. It wasn't like we had to be done in a certain amount of time because we have this many services, and it was structured, but at the same time it was free flowing, and it was so cool. Like, we danced in worship because that's what Kenyan people do. Like, it was part of their worship service, and we got to sing in Swahili, and it was awesome. And then we did an outreach with them that later on that day. So we went into Thika, and we had like this huge concert, and they had like dance teams that came out, and it was in like the parking lot of one of their malls there. And so they were just reaching people like all around Thika, just coming and watching and listening and being a part of what we were doing and joining in with us. And it was awesome to see a church in such a broken place stand up and be such a strong light for Christ and be just so loving towards everyone. Like, anything they had was like, here, this is for you. I'm like, that's awesome. Like, you guys are giving hope to so many people, and that's such a big part of what New Hope's about, and about
How
God.
does your vision of seeing what New Hope does over there impact how you want to act back here in America with New Hope?
Man.
How does it change your perspective on things?
It makes me feel so selfish. Like, I saw how little some of the people that are part of our church over there have, and how willing they were to just give it all away, just because that's what God's called them to do, to love other people and to share his gospel and to go into the world and preach the news of who he is. And I felt like I could do so much more, and I just wasn't. And I found it really encouraging, and so I want to be more like them.
What specific aspects would you like to be more like them?
Just to be more, what's the word? Not to be so scheduled. Like, I feel like I'm always so busy all the time. I'm involved in all these different ministry areas, and I've got 3 different jobs, and when I don't do that, I try to hang out with people and just love on them, and have good fellowship with people that I love. And I feel like sometimes I forget to leave room for the Spirit to guide me and lead me, and for me to take time to listen to what God is telling me to do in specific moments. And I feel like I miss out on so much because I have my own agenda and I'm always so busy. So in that aspect, that's something personally that I want to do. And then being a part of New Hope and their worship team, and going on staff as a resident in September, one of my visions is just to remind our worship team at the Garner campus why we worship and who we worship, and not to just be so. I feel like we all get stuck in this rut of like, it's routine. Like, of course we love Jesus, of course we want to worship him, of course we raise our hands, and then I feel like the authenticity of why we worship kind of gets lost along the way sometimes, and that also gets portrayed within our church, like the church body. Like, I feel like they also start to feel like this, well, of course we love God, of course we worship, of course we know why we worship. I just feel like we lose our passion and authenticity and what we're doing while worshiping sometimes.
So you feel like this trip really helped rekindle that fire, that flame that you
Yeah.
had for God? Now you feel renewed and refreshed, kind of, or?
Yeah, well, definitely renewed. I don't know about refreshed. I feel like this trip kind of beat me down a lot.
Right.
But definitely put a really strong passion in my heart to do more by doing less.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So after that Sunday, the next day we worked with the ARC Orphanage, which we also had to do with our Thika campus. They came out and they were really supportive because the ARC Orphanage is right across the street from our New Hope Kiganjo campus. So they're going to be relying on each other a lot and supporting each other in Christ a lot and trying to reach the students in the area because there's a school right behind the Kiganjo campus. That's not there yet. They haven't built it yet. And there's just so many kids just running around that you're like, where are you from? Like, we can do so much, like, just with you and love on you and teach you about God and show you that there's more than just this. And you can be so much more than what people tell you you are. One of the things that stuck with me was actually something that Maureen said, who is the woman who runs Mercy House. And she was like, she's from a slum, and she was a compassion child, her and her husband. So she was telling us her story, and she's spoken at New Hope before, and she was like, I was starving and sleeping on a mud floor and didn't have clean clothes, and Compassion sponsored me, and well, I mean, the way that you get sponsored by Compassion there too is like there was like a meeting somewhere, and everyone like brings one of their children there, and then the people of Compassion like picks who can be a Compassion child. And she was like, I thank God that I was as malnourished as I was, because that is why they chose me as a Compassion child. And I was like, what a strong statement to make.
Wow.
Like, to thank God that you were so malnourished so that you could be a part of Compassion, because Compassion is something that changed your life.
That's huge. Wow.
I was like, what? And then she starts talking about how she was sponsored through Compassion, and she tried to keep her uniforms really clean so that she could go and say, hey, so I know that I get a new uniform every year, but I don't need a new one yet. Can you give one to my sister instead? And so they would do that. And like every Saturday they had like a meal for the children that were sponsored and stuff like that, and she would like take a Ziploc baggie with her, and she'd like put extra food in the Ziploc baggie so she could take it home so people in her family could eat, because they didn't get those things. It was just the child. And she was sponsored through Compassion and all the way through university, so what they call it there, which would be college, university here. It's all called university there. And so they sponsored her all the way through her university years, and she looked back on her life and was like, I want to give back to God and to the people of my town. And so she decided to start this program called Mercy House. And what Mercy House does is they go into this slum that Oliver, who was also a Compassion child, was sponsored through. Her and Oliver are from the same slum. They go back into that slum and they rescue sexually assaulted, raped, incest girls from the ages of 10 to 15 who have gotten pregnant. And they take them into this home and they teach them life skills and about God, and they give them mentorship, and they give them counseling, and they teach them how to raise a child and how to have a child, and then they give them the opportunity after they've had the child to go back to school and do something with their life. And I think Mercy House was one of the most life-changing moments that I had in Kenya. It was the last thing we did. Literally the day that we got on our plane, we also went to Mercy House. And we walk in and you see a 12-year-old girl holding a 2-year-old baby. And then you realize that's her baby. And you just... it's like I have no words to explain the way I felt. And we all sat down and Maureen gave us her testimony and Oliver's testimony and why they do what they do. And then we got to meet the girls and they sat there with us and they ate with us and they talked with us. And then they led worship. So I stood in a room with 12 to 15 girls who were between the ages of 10 and 15. Well, 10 and there's a few older girls there, so I think the oldest was 18. And at first it was really cool because we got to sing with them, and then when you took a step back and like watched what was really happening, you watched a room full of broken girls stand and praise God with everything that they had. And then you remember why they were there. And you just... I cried. I just couldn't... I felt so selfish for holding back my praise from God when I've been angry or hurt. When I stood here and watched these babies who had babies, who had been hurt and abused and neglected, stand there and say, I know God's real, I love God with all my heart, and I'm going to stand here and worship Him. With no music, it was all just vocals. There was no music, there was nothing flashy, there was no lights. We stood in a living room, and these girls sang at the top of their lungs, just worshiping God. And we were just like, it just got me. It's like, what a cool moment to be a part of. And what a strong life-changing moment that was for me and for the people that were part of this team with me. I watched it. I watched the women and the men around the room who I've become close with over the past week and a half just become overwhelmed by the situation, just drop to their knees and cry and worship God in such an intimate moment. And I don't think anything I ever could say could explain what it was really like that day to be a part of what we were a part of. But every time I talk about it, it just pulls at my heart.
So what would you say to somebody that was on the edge of deciding to do something as big as travel to Kenya on a mission trip, and they're not sure, they're a little scared, a little worried? What would you say to them about your experience and your similar emotions going in? What would you say to that person?
Definitely pray about it. This trip for me was covered with nothing but prayer. And not just prayer by me. My life group prayed for me every week for the same thing. And then I had a group on the side of close friends who prayed for me daily. Like anytime I felt worried about it or anxious or I had anxiety. And I just had so many people who cared about me and loved me that were like, we believe in you and we know that God's put this in your life for a purpose. We're going to pray for you. That was a big part of it. And I was terrified. I was scared out of my mind to go to Kenya. I was so scared that I had so much anxiety that I was like chewing holes in the inside of my mouth, like just because I was like a nervous tick. Like I was just so scared. And I knew God had like big plans. I just didn't know. I didn't know it was gonna happen, so I was like freaking out. And one of the girls in my life group, I think it's the day before I left, came to my house after life group, and she looked at me and she was like, "I have something for you." And I was like, "All right." And she handed me a giving key, and on the key was the word fearless. And she looked at me and she was like, "I've had this for over a year." And when people get given keys, like the main purpose is to give the key away to someone that you feel like God's really telling you to give it to, and for a specific purpose. And she was like, "I never felt like I was supposed to give it away, and then I met you, and you started talking about your trip, and God just really placed it on my heart to give it to you, because I know you've been so scared and nervous, but God has made you fearless, and you are going to do great things." And she gave me a bunch of scripture and prayed with me and just really encouraged me to go and do great things for God. And having people like that in your life is so important when it comes to going on a missions trip, because your world gets so rocked and you're just like, oh man. Like between her and my friend that called me while I was there just to like encourage me, and I was like, God placed specific people in my life for this specific moment. And no matter how scared I was, or nervous, or worried, God always came through, and He always had my back. And He placed so many people in my life to remind me of that. You should do it. If you have any inkling of a tug from God to go on a missions trip to Kenya, even if it's not to Kenya, missions in the United States, like going to do missions like in the mountains or in the ghetto, or even in your hometown, if you have that tug, don't ignore it, because it can be the most life-changing experience you've ever had, and God can do great things through you and with you, and it is worth it. It's hard, it's exhausting, but it's worth it, for sure.
Well, speaking of life-changing, we've been talking recently about Romans and the scripture specifically about being a living sacrifice and the renewing of your mind. How do you feel that plays into your Kenya trip looking back? Like, how do you feel like your mind's been renewed? Or
I didn't really know what to expect going to Kenya. I'd never been to another country besides Canada, and Canada's not much different from the United States. It's different, but not much. And so when I got there and I saw the things that I saw, and I saw how well people did without all of the things that I have, like my cell phone or a computer, and sometimes showers and bathrooms. I used a squatty potty for the first time in my life, and if I never have to use one again, I would not be upset about it. But it made me very appreciative of the things that I did have. And it also made me feel so selfish and guilty for having those things and not doing half of what they do to reach people for Christ. They have it so, like, they have to go through so much more and work so much harder to reach people for Christ than we do. And they're doing it. And I'm sitting here going, I don't do half this stuff at home. Why don't I do this? Like, why why do I think it's so hard? And I feel like I had this, like I felt like I had like this entitlement, like just of.
So are you saying that basically you see your concerns and worries like here about carrying the cross are very minimal, and now you can kind of see that from a different perspective?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Mhm.
Okay. That's great. What about a relationship? Is there one specific relationship that you personally built with an individual while you were over there? Something that really you'll remember for, it doesn't even have to be a relationship, maybe one specific event, maybe, with someone?
Well, I have two. One is still in Kenya, and the other one is here. When I went into this trip, a girl from the Durham campus, her name is Ariel. We've kind of been friends, weren't very close, and we ended up rooming together the whole time we were gone. We're very close in age. And when you go on a trip like this, you need people to talk to and to listen to, and you need to be that person for someone else. And I got to do that with Ariel. We prayed together, we did our devotions together at night. It was like together but separate. Like we did them at the same time. We listened to worship music together, but we did them like on our own. But it was just nice to have, knowing that I had that support. And now that I've come home, like we talk every day, and her and I formed really good friendships with two of the people at the Kenya campus in Thika, and we talk to them every day, and we encourage each other, and I feel like that relationship has become all of those relationships have become so important in my life now. And without going on this trip, like I feel like it wouldn't have happened that way. And then the other, we went to Kiria, which is a little town in the mountains in Kenya. And our church does this project called Hope Rising. And we went in, and we had already donated them like these huge wells because they didn't have clean water, running water, and they had really bad dry seasons, and so they'd go without having any water. And now that's not an issue there, which is really cool. And we started to help build on to their school, which was really cool to like see how people worked there, because it was like, here you have like the big machines and all that stuff, and we're standing there with like these extremely strong women and men, and the women are in skirts like digging out these trenches with like these really old like hoes and shovels. And I've never seen a group of people work so hard and so well together in my life than these people, and it was awesome to be a part of and to help them. But because it was a school, we got to spend time with a lot of the children there, and there's just a special spot in my heart for children in general, and especially children in Kenya. They're just drawn to me, and I love them. So there were a few girls that would like come up to me and hang out with me, and they always wanted me to take pictures with them, and they were just so smart and so funny. And I sat down at one of their school desks, and her name was Maureen, and the other girl's name was Irene, and the other one was Beth. And every time they saw me, they were like, "Do you remember my name?" I was like, "Yeah." And so I started telling them. And one of the girls' name was Anastasia, which is the Kenyan way to say Anastasia, which is my name. And so it was really cool, like, "Oh, my name's Anastasia," and they'd all get really excited. They'd be like, "Oh, that's Anastasia, like, you guys have the same name." And so they were really excited about it. And so I sat down with those four girls at Maureen's desk, and she took out her notebook that they learned Swahili from, and they start teaching me words in Swahili, and I was like, this is so cool. And I got a recording of them saying "I love you" in Swahili, which is nakupende, and I made them say it like over and over again, because I was like, I'll forever be able to hear you guys saying "I love you," like nakupende, nakupende. And they each wrote me a letter and drew me a picture before I left, and they handed it to me right before I left. And it was moments like that where it was like, I'll always remember them, and they will always remember me. And they always remember Amy Lynn. Amy Lynn is our trip leader, and she's done a lot. She's a lot one-on-one with the Kenyan staff and with Kyria and all that stuff. And so they had met her several times, and every time she's there, they're like, that's Amy Lynn. Always remember. And I'm like, that's so cool. Like, how do you remember? Because they don't have phones. They can't take pictures. Like, they took pictures with us, but, like, they don't have those things. And so it's like, how do you just remember? Like, their name, what they were doing, what they were here for last time. Like, you remember everything. And those 4 girls just touched my heart. Like, were really encouraging and just so sweet, and have such a bright future. And I feel like sometimes they probably don't even realize it. But that was definitely a moment where it was like, that touched my heart, you know, that changed my life.
Think you'll ever go back?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Absolutely. Ariel and I kind of want to do it every year. Like, we've talked about it, and we're like, we're so close with our Kenya campus, and when they plant their new campus in Kiganjo, it's going to be, Amy Lynn has this vision for it to be very musically based, because there's so much talent in that area with so many children. And so we talked about me going back and being a part of that, because that's what I'm passionate about, is worship through music ministry. And I got to meet the worship pastor of the Kiganjo campus, and he sat there with me and he picked my brain, like, what would you do here, and what would you do for this, and what would you do for that, and how is practice back home for you, and how should we practice, and what's good for your community and what's not good for your community, and how can you tell, and how do you lead a team of people in this direction, and do you play any other instruments, and if you do play instruments, how can we learn to do that? And it's like, it's so cool to be a part of that, because we are New Hope. So our thing is that we're one church, many locations. And so being one church and believing the same things and supporting each other in those things, and then going in and saying, hey, I believe what you believe, and we have the same mission here, and you're in another country, and I could just step by your side for a second here and help you out and encourage you daily, and just do life together is so cool. And so he taught me some worship songs in Swahili, which is really awesome, and then I got to teach him some of the songs that we do here, and it was just a very cool, like, bonding moment. Like, yeah, we live in 2 totally different countries, but we're still the same church, and we have the same God, and we believe the same things, and we want to reach, teach, and release people to do the same thing that we do. So that was really cool. I forget what you asked me.
If you would ever go back?
Oh, yeah, so I totally go back. Yeah, I definitely want to go back. I'm excited.
Awesome. All right. Any last remarks? Anything else you would like to add?
I mean, there was so much more than that, but if I told you, I'd be here for like the next 5 hours of my
that's
life.
Okay.
So, I mean,
that's okay. We like to hear it all.
If anybody has any questions, please feel free to comment or send a message, or if you know any of us, feel free to come up and talk to me, and I'd love to get coffee or sit down and talk for a little bit and just tell you what it was like. I highly encourage being a part of a missions trip. It is completely life-changing, and it definitely opens your eyes to literally a whole new world that we don't even realize is out there. So yeah.
All right. That was our great friend Anastasia, who just got back from Kenya, and she was gracious enough to share her time there. So thanks again, Anastasia. Look forward to our video later on this week from Romans chapter 6. We will be having a Bible discussion. So tweet us your questions at Beacon Dojo and like and comment below. See you then.